The golden sunset painted Red Rock Valley in amber hues as Zachariah Fuller stood at the edge of town, staring at the wanted poster in her trembling hands. The face of the man who'd murdered her father stared back at her, a menacing reminder of the justice that had yet to be served in this lawless corner of Arizona Territory, 1878. Zachariah Zack, to most folks, had spent 2 years searching for her father's killer, following rumors and whispers across the frontier. She'd traded her fancy Eastern dresses for practical riding clothes, her soft hands now calloused from the rains. Her mother's locket hung around her neck, the only piece of femininity she still allowed herself, hidden beneath her buttoned shirt. At 22, she had learned that a woman traveling alone needed certain precautions. Her honey blonde hair was tucked beneath a worn hat, her curves disguised by loose clothing. She had become adept at fading into the background, watching and listening for any mention of Silas Rowe, the outlaw whose face was etched into her memory as deeply as it was on the poster in her hands. "Madam, you planning on standing there all evening?" a gruff voice called out. Zack turned to see the stagecoach driver, his weathered face impatient. "Town's just up ahead. I'd get moving before dark if I were you." She nodded, folding the poster carefully and tucking it into her saddlebag before mounting her dappled mare. The town of Red Rock Valley spread before her, a single main street lined with wooden buildings, a church steeple rising above the dusty landscape, and the sounds of a piano drifting from what could only be the local saloon. As she rode toward the livery stable, Zack noted the usual establishment's general store, barber shop, sheriff's office, but her attention was caught by a large banner strung across the street. "Annual Founders' Day Dance tonight." People were already gathering at the town hall, women in their finest dresses, men in clean shirts with slicked back hair. A dance was the last thing on Zachariah's mind, but the gathering might provide useful information. In her experience, loose lips at social gatherings had yielded the best leads in her search. After settling her horse at the livery and securing a room at the modest boarding house, Zack cleaned the trail dust from her face and contemplated her appearance in the small, cracked mirror. For once, she decided to let her hair down, the golden waves falling past her shoulders. She had one decent outfit packed away, a simple blue dress that had belonged to her mother. It was outdated by Eastern standards, but would serve well enough for a frontier celebration. The transformation surprised even her. Without the disguise of men's clothing, she looked like the young woman she truly was, though her eyes held a hardness that betrayed her experiences. The dress accentuated her slender waist and brought out the deep blue of her eyes, a stark contrast to the rough riding tracker she'd been just an hour earlier. Meanwhile, at the opposite end of town, Ethan Zaccaro stepped from the barber's chair, rubbing his freshly shaven jaw. At 28, he had already lived several lifetimes, first as a soldier in the Union Army despite his young age, then as a Texas Ranger, and now as the newly appointed sheriff of Red Rock Valley. "You clean up decent, Sheriff," the barber commented, brushing stray hairs from Ethan's shoulders. "The ladies at the dance will take notice," Ethan offered a reserved smile. "I'm not going to find a wife, Jim. I'm going because the mayor insisted the sheriff make an appearance. After what you did stopping that bank robbery last month, folks want to see their hero." Ethan waved off the praise. He didn't consider himself a hero, just a man doing a job that needed doing. The three would-be robbers had made a critical error in choosing Red Rock Valley as their target, not knowing the new sheriff had tracked worse criminals across much harsher terrain. Back in his small office attached to the jailhouse, Ethan dressed in his best shirt and vest, attaching his sheriff's badge as the final touch. He left his gun belt on the desk. This was a social occasion, after all, but slipped a small derringer into his boot. 5 years in law enforcement had taught him never to be completely unarmed. As he made his way toward the town hall, Ethan's thoughts drifted to the telegram he'd received that morning. Word had come that Silas Rowe and his gang had been spotted just 2 counties over. Rowe had a bounty that had grown with each robbery and murder across 3 territories. Bringing him to justice would mean something significant not just for Ethan's career, but for the dozens of victims left in Rowe's bloody wake. The town hall had been transformed for the evening's festivities. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting a warm glow over the wooden floor cleared for dancing. A small band played in the corner, fiddle, piano, and guitar, creating a lively atmosphere. The town's residents had made an effort with their appearances, the women in colorful dresses, the men in their Sunday best. Mayor Collins spotted Ethan immediately. "Sheriff, glad you could make it." He pumped Ethan's hand enthusiastically. "Come, let me introduce you to some of our fine citizens you might not have met yet." Ethan followed dutifully, nodding and shaking hands as the mayor presented him to various townspeople. His attention, however, was captured by the woman who entered through the main doors. She was striking golden hair falling loosely around her shoulders, a simple blue dress that somehow outshone the fancier attire of the local women. But it was her eyes that caught Ethan's interest, alert, observant, scanning the room with purpose rather than excitement. "Who is that?" he asked the mayor, interrupting the man's introduction to the blacksmith's wife. Mayor Collins followed Ethan's gaze. "Don't know her, must be passing through. We get travelers stopping for the Founders' Day celebration sometimes." Zachariah felt conspicuous as she entered the hall. The familiar weight of her derringer, strapped to her thigh beneath her dress, provided some comfort in the unfamiliar setting. She moved to a quiet corner, watching the dancers and listening to conversations around her, hoping to catch any mention of Silas Rowe or his gang. "Seems a shame for the prettiest girl in the room to be standing alone," a deep voice said. Zach turned to find herself looking up at a tall man with dark hair and eyes the color of a summer storm. The silver badge on his vest identified him before he could introduce himself. "Sheriff," she acknowledged with a nod. "Ethan Zaccaro," he replied, extending his hand. "I don't believe I've had the pleasure, Miss." "Fuller, Zachariah Fuller." She took his hand briefly, noting the calluses that spoke of a man familiar with both guns and hard work. "Zachariah." His eyebrow raised slightly. "Unusual name for a lady." "My father expected a son," she said simply. "Most people call me Zach. Are you just passing through our town, Miss Fuller?" There was something in his tone, professional interest rather than mere social curiosity. This man was every inch the lawman, even at a dance. "For now," she answered carefully. "I'm on my way to Tucson. Long journey for a woman alone. I manage." The music changed to a slower waltz and Ethan glanced toward the dance floor. "Would you care to dance, Miss Fuller?" Zach hesitated. Dancing wasn't part of her plan, but neither was drawing attention by rebuffing the local sheriff. "I'm afraid I'm out of practice," she admitted. "Fortunately, it's not something you forget," Ethan said, offering his arm. As he led her to the dance floor, Zachariah caught the curious glances of the townspeople. The sheriff was clearly a man of interest to the local women, judging by their disappointed expressions. Ethan's hand settled respectfully at her waist, the other taking her hand in a proper waltz position. He moved with surprising grace for a man of his size and profession. "So what brings you to these parts, Miss Fuller?" he asked as they moved across the floor. "Tucson's quite a distance." "Family matters," she replied, the practiced lie coming easily. "Interesting," he said, his gray eyes studying her face. "You don't strike me as someone on a family visit." "And what do I strike you as, Sheriff?" A small smile played at the corner of his mouth. "Someone with purpose, someone watching and listening more than enjoying the festivities." Zachariah missed a step and Ethan smoothly corrected, drawing her slightly closer to avoid a collision with another couple. "Careful now," he murmured. "People might think you're nervous around the law." Her eyes snapped to his. "I have nothing to fear from the law, Sheriff Zaccaro." "Glad to hear it." His smile widened slightly, "because I'm very good at recognizing when someone isn't telling the whole truth." Before Zachariah could respond, the music ended. Ethan stepped back, offering a small bow. "Thank you for the dance, Miss Fuller." "Sheriff," she acknowledged with a nod, turning to walk back to her corner. "Miss Fuller," he called after her, causing her to pause. "Just so you know, Silas Rowe was spotted 2 counties over last week." Zachariah froze, her back to him. Slowly, she turned. I don't know who that is, she lied, her heart pounding. Ethan stepped closer, his voice low. Strange, I never mentioned he was an outlaw, yet you reacted like you recognized the name. You're mistaken. I'm rarely mistaken about such things. His eyes held hers. Whatever your business with Rowe, I suggest you leave it to the law. He's dangerous, killed 20 men that we know of. 21, Zachariah said before she could stop herself. Understanding dawned in Ethan's eyes. I see. He studied her for a long moment. Who was he to you? My father was a station master in Silver Creek. 2 years ago, Rowe robbed the express office, shot my father for a strongbox that contained less than $50. Ethan's expression softened slightly. I'm sorry for your loss, Miss Fuller. But seeking vengeance against a man like Rowe will only get you killed. I'm not seeking vengeance, she said. I'm seeking justice. They're not the same thing. They are when the law fails. Zachariah stepped back. Thank you for the dance, Sheriff. Enjoy your evening. She turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Ethan watched her go, a mixture of admiration and concern in his eyes. This was not the first time he'd encountered someone seeking personal justice, but it was the first time that someone had been a beautiful woman with determination burning in her blue eyes. Zachariah made her way outside, needing fresh air to clear her head. The sheriff knew too much or guessed too accurately. Her cover was compromised before she'd even begun asking questions. Quite a dancer, that sheriff. She turned to find an older man smoking a pipe in the shadows of the porch. I suppose, she replied cautiously. Name's Walter Carson. I run the general store. He offered his pipe in greeting but didn't seem offended when she declined. Saw you two talking, seemed intense. Just getting acquainted with local law enforcement, Walter chuckled. Sheriff Zaccaro's only been here 3 months, but he's made quite an impression. Stopped a bank robbery his second week. 3 men, and he took them all down without a single townsperson getting hurt. This information piqued Zachariah's interest. Perhaps the sheriff was more capable than the marshals and deputies who had failed to catch Rowe over the past 2 years. He seems competent, she allowed. Best lawman we've had in these parts. Word is he was one of the top Texas Rangers before he came here. Walter tapped his pipe against the railing. Never seen him take such an interest in a newcomer before, though. The cowboy crossed the dance floor to your corner like he'd been waiting all night for you to arrive. Zachariah felt a flush rise to her cheeks. I'm sure he was just being polite. Walter's eyes twinkled knowingly. Sheriff's not known for dancing with just anyone. In fact, I believe that's the first time I've seen him on the dance floor at all. Before Zachariah could respond, the door opened and Ethan himself stepped out. He nodded to Walter, who gave a knowing smile and excused himself, heading back inside. Miss Fuller, Ethan said, approaching her. I owe you an apology. It wasn't my place to question your motives. Zachariah studied him, surprised by the apology. No, it wasn't, but I suppose it's your job to be suspicious. Being suspicious keeps me alive. He leaned against the railing beside her, looking out at the darkened street. But there are better ways I could have approached the subject. They stood in silence for a moment, the music from inside creating a gentle backdrop to the night sounds of the desert town. My father was killed when I was 14, Ethan said finally. Rustlers. I spent 3 years tracking them down, lying about my age to join a posse. Zachariah turned to look at him, seeing something new in his expression, understanding. Did you find them? She asked. I did, all 5 of them. His jaw tightened at the memory. And when I finally caught up to the man who fired the shot that killed my father, I had my gun trained on him, my finger on the trigger. What happened? I realized that pulling that trigger wouldn't bring my father back. It would only make me like them. He turned to face her. I brought them in to face the judge, all of them hanged, but I didn't have to carry their deaths on my conscience. A convenient moral when you got the outcome you wanted, Zachariah said, unable to keep the edge from her voice. Perhaps, he conceded. But I've seen what vengeance does to people. It hollows them out until there's nothing left but the hunt. Is that what you see when you look at me, Sheriff? Someone hollowed out. Ethan's eyes softened as they took in her face, illuminated by the lantern light spilling from the windows. No, Miss Fuller, I see someone who's been carrying a heavy burden alone for too long." The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. For 2 years, she'd been so focused on tracking Rowe that she'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone really see her as a person rather than a curiosity or an inconvenience. "I should get back to the boarding house," she said, uncomfortable with the sudden vulnerability she felt. "At least let me walk you there. Town's safe enough, but it's dark." She almost refused but found herself nodding instead. They walked in silence down the main street, the sounds of the dance fading behind them. The night was cool, stars brilliant in the clear desert sky. "How long will you be staying in Red Rock Valley?" Ethan asked as they approached the boarding house. "I'm not sure. I thought I might look around for a few days." "If you're interested, I received word that Rowe and his gang robbed a stagecoach near Cottonwood last week, 3 passengers killed." He paused at the bottom of the boarding house steps. "I'm riding out tomorrow to meet with the sheriff there, compare notes." Zachariah studied him in the moonlight. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're going to go after him with or without my help. I'd rather it be with." "You want me to come with you?" she asked, surprised. "I want you to stay alive, Miss Fuller, and the best way to ensure that is to work together rather than at cross purposes." He held her gaze steadily. "You've been tracking him for 2 years. You might know things that could help me bring him in. And what do I get out of this arrangement? Justice." He said it simply. "The legal kind where Rowe faces a judge and jury before he hangs." Zachariah considered his offer. Working with the sheriff hadn't been part of her plan, but neither was revealing her purpose so quickly. Perhaps this was an opportunity she could use his resources, his badge, to get closer to Rowe than she'd managed on her own. "What time do we leave?" she asked finally. Relief flickered across Ethan's face. "Dawn, meet me at the livery stable," she nodded. "Good night, Sheriff Ethan," he corrected. "If we're going to be working together, you might as well use my name." "Ethan," she repeated, the name feeling strange on her lips after addressing him formally. Good night, Zachariah." He tipped his hat and waited until she entered the boarding house before turning to walk back toward his office. Inside her rented room, Zachariah removed her dress and hung it carefully. She sat on the edge of the bed, turning her father's pocket watch in her hands. The engraving inside the cover was worn from how often she'd traced the words with her fingertip. "Time reveals truth. Love, Margaret." Her mother had given it to her father on their wedding day. Now it was one of the few possessions Zachariah had left of either parent. Her mother had died of fever when Zach was 16, her father's murder coming just 4 years later. She hadn't planned on partnering with a lawman, especially one as perceptive as Ethan Zaccaro. There was something about him that unsettled her, not in a frightening way, but in a manner that made her aware of herself as a woman, not just an avenger. That night, for the first time in months, Zachariah dreamed not of Silas Rowe's capture, but of storm-gray eyes and the feeling of strong hands guiding her across a dance floor. Dawn broke clear and cold over Red Rock Valley. Zachariah arrived at the livery stable dressed again in her practical riding clothes, her hair braided and tucked beneath her hat. She found Ethan already there, saddling a powerful black gelding. "Morning," he greeted her, his eyes taking in her transformation from the woman in the blue dress to the determined rider before him. "Ready for a long day's ride? I've been ready for 2 years," she replied, moving to prepare her own horse. The livery owner appeared with a pot of coffee and 2 tin cups. "Thought you might want something hot before you head out, Sheriff. Cold morning." "Thanks, Tom." Ethan accepted the coffee gratefully, handing a cup to Zachariah. "We appreciate it." As they sipped the strong brew, Ethan outlined their journey. "It's about 30 miles to Cottonwood. We should get there by mid-afternoon if we keep a good pace." "What exactly are you hoping to learn from the sheriff there?" Zachariah asked. "Details about the robbery, how many men, their approach, any distinctive methods. Rowe has patterns. If we can confirm it's the same gang, we might be able to predict their next move." They set out as the sun crested the eastern mountains, the town still quiet behind them. Zachariah found herself studying Ethan's profile as they rode. In the early morning light, The lines of his face seemed more pronounced, a small scar along his jaw, the slight crease between his brows that suggested he frowned in concentration often. "How did you become sheriff here?" she asked as they followed the trail northward. "You mentioned you were a Texas Ranger." Ethan adjusted his hat against the rising sun. "Mayor Collins telegraphed the Rangers looking for recommendations after their last sheriff was killed in an ambush. My captain suggested me." "Why did you accept?" "Seems like a step down from the Rangers." A shadow passed over his face. "Last job with the Rangers went bad. Informant double-crossed us. My partner was killed along with 2 innocent bystanders." His hands tightened on the reins. "I needed a change." "I'm sorry," Zachariah said quietly. He nodded acknowledgement. "What about you? What did you do before?" "Before I started hunting my father's killer," she gave a humorless smile. "I was a school teacher in Silver Creek, taught children their letters and numbers while my father ran the stage station." Ethan looked surprised. "A school teacher? Does that seem so unlikely?" "No, it's just," he studied her with new interest. "You handle yourself like someone more accustomed to the trail. 2 years is a long time to learn new skills." She urged her horse to a slightly faster pace. "Necessity is an effective teacher." They rode in companionable silence for a while. The desert landscape unfolding around them, vast stretches of scrubland dotted with cacti and the occasional stunted tree. By mid-morning, the sun was high and hot, and they paused in the shade of a rock outcropping to rest the horses and drink from their canteens. "You said Rowe killed 21 men that you know of," Zachariah said, breaking the silence. "How many of his gang have been caught?" 3 over the years. None of them would talk, too afraid of Rowe, even facing the gallows. Ethan leaned against the warm stone. "From what we've pieced together, he usually travels with 4 or 5 men. The composition changes, some get killed, some leave, new ones join." "He had 3 men with him when he killed my father," Zachariah said, her voice dropping. "One was tall with a burned scar across his face. Another had a silver front tooth that caught the light when he smiled. The third was young, couldn't have been more than 18. Ethan watched her closely. "You saw them?" She nodded. "I was bringing my father his lunch at the station. I saw them ride in through the window. When I heard shouting, I hid under the office desk." Her voice became distant, lost in the memory. "My father refused to open the safe without the express company's agent present. That's when Rowe shot him right through the heart. I saw everything. They didn't search the office, they did, but the desk had a panel that concealed the footwell. My father had shown it to me once, said it was where they used to hide valuables during Indian raids in the early days." Her eyes hardened. "I was less than 3 feet away from Rowe, could smell the tobacco on his breath as he rifled through the drawers above me." Ethan was silent for a moment. "You're lucky they didn't find you." "Luck had nothing to do with it. I was too terrified to breathe." She recorked her canteen with unnecessary force. "When they left, I crawled out and held my father while he died. His last words were to tell me to be brave." "And you have been," Ethan said quietly. Zachariah looked away, uncomfortable with the understanding in his eyes. "We should keep moving if we want to reach Cottonwood by afternoon." They remounted and continued their journey, the conversation turning to more practical matters: water sources along the route, signs of other travelers, the weather patterns typical for that time of year. Ethan was impressed by Zachariah's knowledge of the territory and her riding skills. Whatever she might have been before her father's death, she had clearly adapted to the demanding life of the frontier. As predicted, they reached Cottonwood in the early afternoon. The town was smaller than Red Rock Valley, little more than a cluster of buildings serving the nearby ranches and mines. The sheriff's office was a simple adobe structure with a wooden sign and a single cell visible through the barred window. Sheriff Monroe was a heavy-set man with a bushy mustache and suspicious eyes that softened somewhat at the sight of Ethan's badge. "Sheriff Zaccaro," he acknowledged. "Got your telegraph yesterday. Didn't expect you'd bring company." His gaze lingered on Zachariah. "Miss Fuller is assisting in my investigation," Ethan said smoothly. "She has information about Silas Rowe that may be valuable." Monroe's eyebrows rose, but he nodded. "Come on in then. Got coffee on the stove if you're interested." Inside, the office was neat but sparse: a desk, a gun rack, wanted posters on the walls. Monroe poured coffee into chipped mugs and gestured for them to sit. Stagecoach robbery happened 6 days ago, about 10 miles south of town, he began without preamble. 5 men, all masked. Driver was shot trying to outrun them. 3 passengers killed when they resisted 2 men and a woman. The woman was killed too, Zachariah asked, her voice tight. Monroe nodded grimly. First time I've known Rowe's gang to kill a woman. She was traveling with her husband. Seems she pulled a derringer when they shot him. You're certain it was Rowe? Ethan asked. One of the passengers survived, played dead after taking a bullet in the shoulder. Said he heard the others call their leader Silas. Described a man matching Rowe's build and manner. Monroe sipped his coffee. Plus, they took not just the strongbox but specific items from the passengers' watches, jewelry, anything valuable. That fits Rowe's pattern, Ethan agreed. Any idea which direction they headed afterward? Southwest, according to tracks. Had a posse follow them for 15 miles before the trail got confused with some cattle drives. Monroe shook his head. Could be heading toward the border, or maybe circling back toward the Northern Territories. Or toward Red Rock Valley, Zachariah suggested. Both men looked at her. What makes you say that? Monroe asked. Rowe has a pattern of hitting towns during celebrations or events, she explained. Times when people are distracted, carrying extra money or valuables. Red Rock Valley is in the middle of its Founders' Day festival. Ethan considered this. She's right. 3 of Rowe's known robberies happened during town celebrations: Silver Creek during the Harvest Festival, Prescott during their territorial fair, and Tucson during Christmas festivities. Monroe's expression grew concerned. You thinking he might hit Red Rock next? It's possible, Ethan acknowledged. The bank would be holding extra cash for the festival, and the stagecoach bringing in supplies would be carrying more than usual. When's the next stage due? Zachariah asked. Tomorrow afternoon, Ethan replied, his eyes meeting hers. With the payroll for the copper mine outside town. Monroe let out a low whistle. That'd be a tempting target. We need to get back, Ethan said, standing. Sheriff, I appreciate the information. Wish I could offer more help, but I'm short-handed as it is. Monroe rose to shake Ethan's hand. Be careful. That gang's getting bolder, killing women now. Outside, Ethan and Zachariah mounted quickly, pushing their horses to a faster pace than they'd maintained on the journey to Cottonwood. You think I'm right? Zachariah asked as they rode. About Rowe targeting Red Rock, I think it's too likely to ignore, Ethan replied grimly. The timing, the payroll, the festival, it all fits, and if he's escalating to killing women, he's becoming more dangerous. They rode hard through the afternoon, stopping only briefly to rest the horses. As dusk approached, Ethan reluctantly called a halt. We'll need to make camp, he said. Horses can't go much further today, and it's too dangerous to travel these trails in the dark. They found a small arroyo that offered some protection from the wind and potential eyes. Ethan built a small fire while Zachariah tended to the horses, rubbing them down and ensuring they were securely hobbled where they could graze on the sparse desert grass. As night fell, they sat on opposite sides of the fire, eating jerky and hardtack from their saddlebags. The stars emerged overhead, brilliant in the clear desert sky. How did you track Rowe for 2 years? Ethan asked, breaking the comfortable silence. Most lawmen with resources at their disposal haven't managed to stay on his trail that long. Zachariah considered the question. I listened in places most lawmen wouldn't go. Saloon girls, washerwomen, stable boys, people who notice things but are rarely asked about them. She poked at the fire with a stick. And I wasn't obviously hunting him, just a woman traveling alone, not worth much notice. Must have been lonely, Ethan observed. The comment caught her off guard. No one had asked about the personal toll of her quest before. I stopped noticing loneliness after a while, she admitted. It became normal. Ethan studied her across the firelight. What will you do after Rowe is brought to justice? I don't know, she said honestly. I haven't thought beyond finding him. The hollowing out I mentioned, he said quietly. That's the danger. When vengeance becomes your only purpose, what's left when it's fulfilled? Zachariah had no answer. For 2 years, every decision, every move had been focused on finding Silas Rowe. The thought of life afterward was like trying to see beyond a mountain range impossible until you reached the summit. "What about you?" she deflected. "Being sheriff of a small town doesn't seem like a lifelong ambition for a former Texas Ranger." Ethan smiled slightly. "Maybe not. But it's good, honest work. The people of Red Rock Valley deserve someone who'll protect them." He poked at the fire. "And after what happened with my partner, I needed somewhere quieter to figure things out." "Do you blame yourself for your partner's death?" "Every day," he said without hesitation. "I was the senior agent. The operation was my responsibility. That's a heavy burden to carry. No heavier than yours." Their eyes met across the fire, recognition passing between them, two people carrying weights invisible to the casual observer, but always present, always felt. "We should get some rest," Ethan said finally. "We'll need to ride out before dawn if we want to reach Red Rock Valley by midday tomorrow." They arranged their bedrolls on opposite sides of the fire. Zachariah lay awake for some time, watching the stars and listening to the night sounds of the desert, the distant howl of a coyote, the rustle of small creatures in the brush, the occasional shifting of the horses. Across the dying fire, she could make out Ethan's profile, his breathing too measured for sleep. He was awake too, perhaps turning over the same thoughts that kept her from rest, what tomorrow might bring, whether Rowe would indeed target Red Rock Valley, what would happen when they finally confronted the man who had altered both their paths. "Ethan," she said softly. "Yes, thank you. For believing me about Rowe possibly targeting the town. Your theory makes sense. I'd have been a fool to dismiss it." She smiled slightly in the darkness. "Still, not every lawman would take the word of a woman so seriously." "Not every woman tracks a killer across 3 territories for 2 years," he replied. "You've earned the right to be taken seriously." The simple acknowledgement meant more than she expected. For 2 years, she'd fought to be heard, to be believed, to be more than just a grieving daughter with an impossible quest. "We'll catch him," Ethan added, his voice carrying conviction, "one way or another." "Yes," she agreed, "we will." With that shared promise hanging in the night air between them, Zachariah finally drifted into sleep. They broke camp before first light, riding hard through the dawn hours. The knowledge that Rowe might be planning to strike Red Rock Valley created an urgency that drove them and their mounts to the limits of endurance. By mid-morning, familiar landmarks appeared, the distinctive red rock formations that gave the valley its name rising in the distance. They reached the outskirts of town shortly after noon, their horses lathered and breathing hard from the pace. "We need to warn the mayor and organize a defense," Ethan said as they rode directly to his office. "If Rowe's planning to hit the stagecoach with the mine payroll, we have less than 24 hours to prepare." In the sheriff's office, Ethan quickly briefed his deputy, a young man named Cooper, while Zachariah studied the wanted posters on the wall. Rowe's face stared back at her, the cold eyes, the scar along his chin, the features she'd memorized from both posters and her own haunted memories. "Cooper, find the mayor and tell him I need to speak with him immediately," Ethan instructed. "Then round up any men in town with law enforcement experience, former soldiers, deputies, anyone who can handle themselves in a fight." As Cooper hurried out, Ethan turned to Zachariah. "I need you to draw me a map, everything you remember about the stagecoach route where Rowe attacked in Cottonwood. If he uses similar tactics, we need to anticipate where he might strike." Zachariah nodded, taking a seat at the desk with the paper Ethan provided. As she sketched the terrain based on Sheriff Monroe's description and her own observations, she felt a strange sense of purpose, not just the single-minded focus of vengeance, but something more constructive. For the first time in 2 years, she was working to prevent deaths rather than merely avenge them. Mayor Collins arrived, flustered and concerned by the deputy's urgent summons. His face grew grave as Ethan explained their suspicions. "Cancel the stagecoach," the mayor suggested immediately. Ethan shook his head. "If we cancel it, Rowe will just move on to another target, possibly one we're less prepared for. This is our chance to catch him." You're proposing to use the stagecoach as bait, Collins looked appalled, with the mine payroll and innocent passengers. No passengers, Ethan clarified. We'll spread word that the stage will be delayed due to a broken axle. Anyone needing to travel can take the next one. As for the payroll, he glanced at Zachariah. We'll replace it with an empty strongbox. The real money can go to the mine under guard separately. And who'll be on this stage walking into an ambush? The mayor demanded. Me, Ethan said simply. Along with volunteers who know exactly what they're facing, Collins shook his head. It's too risky, Sheriff. Not as risky as letting Rowe hit an unprepared target. You saw what happened in Cottonwood, 3 innocent people dead, including a woman. The mayor considered this, his political mind clearly weighing public safety against political fallout. Very well, he conceded finally, but be careful, Sheriff, this town needs you. After Collins left, Cooper returned with 3 men, a former Army sergeant now running the general store, an ex-deputy who'd retired to Red Rock for his health, and a young rancher who'd ridden with posses before. Ethan outlined his plan to the assembled men. The stagecoach would depart as scheduled, following its normal route. Ethan and 2 men would ride inside as if guarding the payroll. The others would follow at a distance, ready to close in when Rowe's gang attacked. What about me? Zachariah asked when he finished. Ethan's expression grew guarded. I need you to stay in town. That wasn't our agreement, she said firmly. This is different. We're deliberately riding into an ambush. All the more reason you need every gun you can trust. Her eyes held his steadily. And you know I can handle myself. The men exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly uncertain about the presence of a woman in such a dangerous operation. Miss Fuller has been tracking Rowe for 2 years, Ethan told them. She knows his methods better than anyone here. No offense, madam, the former deputy said, but tracking's different from shooting. Without taking her eyes from Ethan's, Zachariah drew her revolver and fired through the open window. Outside, a tin sitting on the hitching post flew into the air. Any other concerns about my qualifications? She asked calmly, holstering her weapon. The men stared at her with new respect, and Ethan couldn't quite hide his smile. Miss Fuller will ride as a passenger, he decided. Her presence might make Rowe's gang less suspicious. They won't expect a trap with a woman aboard. With the plan agreed upon, the men dispersed to make preparations. When they were alone, Ethan turned to Zachariah. That was impressive shooting, he acknowledged. But I need to know you'll follow orders tomorrow. This isn't about personal vengeance, it's about protecting the town and bringing criminals to justice. I understand the difference, she assured him. I've waited 2 years for justice. I can wait 1 more day to do it right. Ethan studied her, seeming to search for something in her eyes. Whatever he saw apparently satisfied him. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be challenging for all of us. That evening, Zachariah found herself unable to stay in her boarding house room. The knowledge that Rowe might be less than a day's ride away, that tomorrow could finally bring the confrontation she'd sought for so long, left her restless and on edge. She walked through town, observing the Founders' Day celebrations continuing unabated. The townspeople were blissfully unaware of the danger potentially approaching. Children played games in the street, couples strolled arm in arm, music drifted from the saloon. Life continuing as normal while she stood on the precipice of the moment that had driven her for 2 years. Her wandering brought her to the sheriff's office. Light still burned in the window, and through the glass she could see Ethan at his desk, cleaning his revolver with methodical care. She knocked lightly on the door before entering. You should be resting, he said without looking up. So should you. Ethan set the gun down and leaned back in his chair. Too much on my mind. Same. She took a seat across from him. I keep thinking about tomorrow, about finally seeing Rowe face to face again. Are you afraid? The question was unexpected. No, she said after a moment's consideration. Not of Rowe. I'm afraid of what happens after, of the emptiness you described. Ethan nodded, understanding. The purpose that's defined you for so long suddenly fulfilled. What if there's nothing left of me? The vulnerability in her voice surprised even her. What if vengeance is all I am now? It isn't, Ethan said with quiet certainty. I've seen vengeance consume people until there's nothing else. That's not you, Zachariah. How can you be so sure? Because you still care about justice, not just revenge. Because you agreed to work with me rather than going after Rowe alone. Because, he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. Because when you thought Rowe might target this town, your first instinct was to protect people you don't even know. His words eased something in her chest that had been tight for so long she'd forgotten it could be otherwise. What will you do? He asked. After tomorrow. I don't know, she admitted. I haven't let myself think beyond finding Rowe. Teaching again, perhaps, though I'm not sure I'm the same person who stood before a classroom of children 2 years ago. People change, Ethan acknowledged, but that doesn't mean the core of who you are disappears. And what's at my core, Sheriff Zaccaro? She asked, a small smile playing at her lips despite the seriousness of the conversation. His gray eyes held hers. Courage, determination, a sense of justice that wouldn't let you accept your father's murder going unpunished. He paused. And somewhere underneath all that, I suspect there's still a schoolteacher who cares about building things rather than just avenging them. The insight was so accurate it left her momentarily speechless. This man who had known her for less than 2 days somehow saw beyond the hardened exterior she'd cultivated for years. Thank you, she said simply. For what? For seeing me, not just the woman hunting an outlaw. Something shifted in Ethan's expression, a softening, a warmth that hadn't been there before. From the moment you walked into that dance, Zachariah Fuller, I haven't been able to see much else. The admission hung in the air between them, changing the atmosphere in the small office. For 2 years, Zachariah had pushed aside anything resembling feminine emotions or desires. Now, under Ethan's steady gaze, she felt them rushing back with unexpected force. Before either could speak further, a commotion outside drew their attention. Voices raised in alarm, running footsteps. Ethan was on his feet immediately, reaching for his gun belt. They hurried outside to find a rider dismounting from an exhausted horse, people gathering around him. Sheriff, the man called, spotting Ethan. Stagecoach from Millerville was attacked 15 miles east. Driver and guard both shot. Rowe? Ethan asked sharply. Don't know the name, but 5 men, all masked. They took everything of value from the passengers, then let the stage continue on. Ethan and Zachariah exchanged looks of alarm. Rowe doesn't usually let witnesses live, she said quietly. Unless he wanted the news to reach town, Ethan realized. He's sending a message establishing his presence in the area. Or it's a distraction, Zachariah suggested. While we focus on the eastern road, he could be preparing to hit something else. Ethan turned to the messenger. Any passengers hurt? 2 men roughed up for resisting, but no one killed. Stage should be arriving within the hour. Cooper, Ethan called to his deputy, who had emerged from the saloon at the commotion. Get the doctor ready for the injured passengers. I want statements from everyone on that stage as soon as they arrive. As the crowd dispersed, murmuring anxiously about the attack, Ethan drew Zachariah aside. This changes things, he said in a low voice. If Rowe's already in the area, he might have scouts watching the town. Which means he could know we're preparing for him, Zachariah concluded. We need to adjust our plan. If he's watching, he'll be suspicious of too many armed men near the stagecoach tomorrow. They returned to the sheriff's office, where Ethan quickly sketched a new strategy. Instead of loading the stage with armed men, they would make it appear vulnerable, just Ethan, the regular driver, and Zachariah as passengers. The other deputies and volunteers would be positioned along the route in advance, hidden and ready to close the trap when Rowe's gang attacked. It's riskier, Ethan acknowledged. We'll be outnumbered until the others can reach us. But more believable, Zachariah agreed. Rowe won't suspect a trap if the stage appears to be running its normal route with minimal protection. When the stagecoach from Millerville finally arrived, Ethan interviewed each passenger carefully. Their descriptions of the attackers confirmed Zachariah's suspicions: 1 tall man with a burned scar, another with a silver tooth, and the leader, whose voice and manner matched Rowe's known characteristics. They were almost polite, one passenger recounted. Said as long as we cooperated, no one would get hurt unnecessarily. The driver tried to outrun them at first, that's when they shot him in the shoulder. And they let you continue on afterward, Ethan pressed, said to deliver a message to Red Rock Valley. The passenger frowned, trying to recall the exact words. Tell them Silas Rowe sends his regards and he's looking forward to tomorrow's delivery. Ethan's expression darkened. He knows about the payroll stage, and he wants us to know he knows, Zachariah added. He's confident doesn't care if we're expecting him. Or he's planning something we haven't anticipated, Ethan said grimly. They spent the rest of the evening refining their plan, anticipating contingencies, and preparing for all possibilities. When every detail had been arranged, Ethan insisted on walking Zachariah back to the boarding house. The town was quiet now, the celebrations subdued by news of the stagecoach attack. Stars glittered overhead, the desert night cool and clear. Are you ready for tomorrow? Ethan asked as they walked. I've been ready for 2 years, Zachariah replied, then added more softly, but I'm glad I'm not facing him alone. They paused at the steps of the boarding house. The moment felt weighted with unspoken words, possibilities that neither had time to explore with tomorrow's danger looming. Whatever happens, Ethan said, his voice low, stay close to me. Rowe is unpredictable and dangerous. Don't take unnecessary risks. I could say the same to you, she replied. You're the one he'll see as the primary threat. Then we'll watch each other's backs. He reached out, his hand briefly touching hers. Get some rest, Zachariah. Tomorrow will test us both. She nodded, reluctant to end the moment, but knowing they both needed clear heads for what was to come. Good night, Ethan. Good night. He waited until she was safely inside before turning away, his footsteps fading into the night. In her room, Zachariah prepared methodically for the next day, checking her revolver, laying out her clothes, packing her few possessions in case a quick departure became necessary. When everything was ready, she took out her father's watch one last time, running her thumb over the inscription. Time reveals truth, she whispered. Tomorrow would finally reveal whether the truth she sought would bring her peace or merely an empty victory. Dawn arrived with a sky streaked in crimson and gold, red sky at morning. Sailors take warning, as her father used to say. Zachariah dressed with care, choosing practical riding clothes but adding her mother's locket around her neck. If today was to be the culmination of her 2-year quest, she wanted something of both parents with her. At the livery stable, she found Ethan checking the stagecoach, an older model but still sturdy, freshly greased and ready for the journey. The regular driver, a weathered man named Jenkins, was harnessing the team of 4 horses with practiced efficiency. Morning, Ethan greeted her, his eyes taking in her appearance with a brief glance that missed nothing: the determined set of her jaw, the slight tension in her shoulders, the revolver at her hip partially concealed by her jacket. Everything ready? She asked, keeping her voice casual for the benefit of anyone who might be watching. As ready as it can be. He helped her check her saddle before she mounted. They would ride alongside the stagecoach until they reached the outskirts of town, then board as passengers to maintain the illusion of a normal run. The other men involved in the operation had departed hours earlier, positioning themselves at strategic points along the route where Rowe was most likely to attack. The strongbox, empty except for a few bags of lead shot to give it weight, was secured under the driver's seat, visible enough to tempt but protected enough to seem valuable. They departed Red Rock Valley as the town was coming to life, shopkeepers opening their doors, workers heading to their jobs, children being shepherded to school. Few paid much attention to the stagecoach, a common sight on its regular run to the mining settlement 20 miles west. Once past the town limits, Ethan signaled for Jenkins to stop. He and Zachariah dismounted, tethering their horses to the back of the stage before climbing inside. Their mounts would be collected later by Cooper, ensuring the stage appeared to be making its normal run with passengers rather than an armed escort. Inside the coach, they settled on opposite benches. Ethan removed his badge, tucking it into his pocket, no sense advertising his position if Rowe's scouts were watching. "Based on the terrain, I expect they'll hit us at Cougar Pass," he said quietly as the stage rumbled forward. "It's the perfect spot for an ambush, narrow road, high rocks on both sides, no easy escape." Zachariah nodded. "How far?" "About 10 miles. We'll reach it in less than 2 hours." He checked his pocket watch. "Our men should be in position by now." The stage rattled along the rutted road, swaying with each bump and turn. Through the window, Zachariah watched the landscape past desert giving way to more rugged terrain as they approached the foothills that led to the mining country. "What will you do?" she asked suddenly, "after we catch Rowe?" Ethan looked surprised by the question. "Continue as sheriff, I suppose. Red Rock Valley's a good town with good people." "Is that enough? After the Rangers, after the bigger cases you've handled?" He considered this, his gray eyes thoughtful. "Maybe. There's something to be said for putting down roots, building something lasting." He studied her face. "What about you? Will you go back to teaching?" "I don't know," she admitted. "It seems like another life now. You could stay," he suggested, his voice carefully neutral. "Red Rock Valley could use a school teacher. The current one is eager to retire." The idea caught her off guard, staying in one place after 2 years of constant movement, building a life rather than pursuing vengeance. More surprising was the appeal of the suggestion, especially coming from Ethan. Before she could respond, Jenkins called down from the driver's seat. Approaching Cougar Pass, all personal considerations vanished as they focused on the immediate danger. Ethan checked his revolver one last time, then reached into his boot to extract a small derringer, a backup weapon if things went badly. "Remember," he said quietly, "our job is to delay them until the others can close in. Don't take unnecessary risks." Zachariah nodded, her heart beginning to race as the stagecoach slowed to navigate the narrow passage between towering rock walls. This was at the moment she'd pursued across thousands of miles, the confrontation she'd imagined countless times. They entered the pass, the coach's wheels echoing against the stone walls. Jenkins kept the team at a steady pace, his experienced hands guiding them through the winding route. The sun was high now, casting sharp shadows across the trail. The attack, when it came, was swift and coordinated. A fallen tree blocked the road ahead, forcing Jenkins to rein in sharply. Almost simultaneously, riders appeared from behind rock outcroppings on both sides of the pass. 5 men, all masked, guns drawn. "Hold it right there," a commanding voice called out. "This is a robbery." Ethan and Zachariah exchanged glances. Even muffled by the mask, she recognized the voice from her nightmares. Silas Rowe. Jenkins raised his hands as instructed. 2 of the outlaws approached the coach, one covering the driver while the other pulled open the door. "Out," he ordered, gesturing with his revolver. "Nice and easy." Ethan exited first, hands raised to shoulder height, playing the part of a cooperative passenger. Zachariah followed, her movements deliberate, giving no indication of the storm of emotions raging inside her as she came face to face with her father's killers. The man with the burn scar was there, she recognized him immediately. And the one with the silver tooth, grinning malevolently as he kept his gun trained on Jenkins. The young one was absent, replaced by 2 older, harder-looking men she didn't recognize. And then there was Rowe himself, still mounted on a powerful black horse, his mask not quite concealing the scar along his chin that had featured in every wanted poster for the past 3 years. "Well now," he said, studying his captives, "what have we here?" "A gentleman and his lady traveling to the mines." His eyes narrowed as they settled on Ethan. "You look familiar, friend." "Just a businessman," Ethan replied evenly. "Taking my wife to visit her brother at the mine," Rowe chuckled. "Is that so?" He turned his attention to Zachariah, his gaze lingering uncomfortably. "Pretty wife you've got, too pretty to be hidden away at a mining camp." Zachariah kept her expression neutral, though her hand itched to reach for her concealed weapon. Not yet, she told herself. They needed to wait for the right moment when their backup would be close enough to help. "The strongbox," Rowe instructed his men. "Get it down." Two outlaws moved to the front of the coach, manhandling the heavy box from its secured position. When they set it on the ground, Rowe dismounted, approaching it with evident satisfaction. "Open it," he ordered Jenkins. "Don't have the key," the driver replied. "Company policy drivers don't carry keys to the strongboxes." Rowe turned to Ethan. "What about you businessmen? You carrying anything valuable? Watches, money, jewelry?" "Just traveling funds," Ethan said, slowly reaching into his coat. "Take it, we don't want trouble." "Wise decision." Rowe accepted the offered wallet, then turned to Zachariah. "And you, pretty lady, any trinkets worth my while?" Her mother's locket burned against her skin beneath her shirt. "Nothing of value," she answered, her voice steady despite the rage building inside her. Rowe stepped closer, too close. "Let me be the judge of that." He reached out, pushing aside her jacket to check for hidden valuables. His hand brushed against her waist, and she couldn't suppress a flinch of revulsion. It was then that his eyes narrowed, his head tilting slightly as he studied her face. "Have we met before, miss? You seem familiar." The moment stretched, taut with danger. Zachariah knew he was trying to place her the frightened girl hiding under a desk 2 years ago versus the woman standing before him now. Recognition would mean immediate danger. Before Rowe could pursue the thought, one of his men called out, "Boss, riders coming, looks like a posse." Ethan's men were moving in earlier than planned. The distraction was all they needed. In one smooth motion, Ethan drew his concealed revolver, shoving Zachariah aside as he fired at the nearest outlaw. The man dropped with a cry of surprise and pain. Zachariah rolled behind the stagecoach wheel, drawing her own weapon as chaos erupted. Gunfire exploded around them as Rowe's men scrambled for cover, returning fire at both Ethan and the approaching riders. Jenkins dove from the driver's seat, taking shelter beneath the coach. Horses reared and whinnied in panic, adding to the confusion. Through the melee, Zachariah kept her focus on one target, Rowe himself. He had retreated behind a large boulder, firing methodically at the approaching posse. He hadn't spotted her position yet, his attention directed toward the more obvious threats. Ethan had taken cover behind a rocky outcropping, exchanging fire with the outlaw sporting the silver tooth. Their eyes met briefly across the battleground, and he gave her a quick nod, a signal to proceed with their plan. Keeping low, Zachariah circled around the stagecoach, using the terrain for cover as she worked her way toward Rowe's position. 2 years of tracking, of learning to move silently through wilderness, served her well now as she navigated the rocky ground undetected. She could hear the posse drawing closer, their gunfire becoming more effective as they closed in. One of Rowe's men fell, then another. The odds were shifting rapidly. Rowe must have sensed it too. He whistled sharply for his horse, clearly planning to make an escape while his remaining men provided covering fire. The animal trotted toward him, reins trailing. It was now or never. Zachariah stepped from behind the rock, her revolver aimed steadily at the man who had haunted her dreams for 2 years. "Silas Rowe," she called, her voice carrying despite the gunfire. He spun, gun raised instinctively, but froze when he saw her standing openly, weapon trained on him. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded, though something in his eyes suggested dawning recognition. "My name is Zachariah Fuller," she said clearly. "You murdered my father at Silver Creek Station 2 years ago." Understanding flooded his face, followed by a cruel smile. "The station master's daughter, you were there under the desk," he laughed harshly. "I should have checked more carefully." "Drop your weapon," she ordered, her aim unwavering despite the storm of emotions raging through her. "Or what? You'll shoot me." His smile widened. "You've had your gun on me for several seconds now, girl. If you were going to pull that trigger, you'd have done it already." He was right and wrong. She had imagined this moment countless times, had seen herself exacting vengeance with her own hand. But standing here now, she realized Ethan had been correct. Killing Rowe wouldn't bring her father back, and becoming an executioner would change her in ways she wasn't willing to accept. "I'm not going to kill you," she said steadily. "You're going to stand trial for my father's murder. You're going to hang with everyone watching, not as some legendary outlaw, but as the coward who shot an unarmed man over $50. Fury flashed across Rowe's face. Nobody calls Silas Rowe a coward. His gun hand twitched, starting to rise. Zachariah tensed, her finger tightening on the trigger. A shot rang out, but not from her weapon. Rowe cried out in pain, his revolver falling from suddenly limp fingers as blood blossomed on his shoulder. He staggered back, clutching the wound. Ethan stepped into view, his smoking gun still trained on the outlaw. "It's over, Rowe. Your men are dead or captured." It was true. Looking around, Zachariah could see the remaining outlaws were down or surrendering to the posse members now swarming the pass. Rowe's eyes darted between them, calculating even in defeat. "You won't take me alive," he snarled, his uninjured hand reaching for a knife at his belt. Before he could draw it, Zachariah fired. Her bullet struck the ground at his feet, stopping him cold. "The next one won't miss," she promised. "And I'm aiming lower than your shoulder." Something in her voice, the absolute certainty, perhaps convinced him. Slowly, Rowe raised his hands in surrender. As Ethan moved forward to secure the outlaw, Zachariah felt a strange sense of emptiness washing over her. 2 years of pursuit, of single-minded determination, culminating in this moment not with the vengeance she had once craved, but with justice being served through proper channels. Was this hollow feeling what Ethan had warned her about? The purpose that had driven her suddenly fulfilled, leaving a void where burning motivation had once resided. She holstered her weapon, watching as Ethan roughly bound Rowe's hands behind his back. The outlaw's eyes found hers over Ethan's shoulder, cold, hateful, but ultimately defeated. "Your father begged for his life," Rowe spat, a last attempt to wound her. "Cried like a child before I shot him." Zachariah stepped closer, looking directly into the eyes of her father's killer. "No, he didn't. My father died with dignity. I was there, remember? I saw everything." She leaned in, her voice dropping so only he could hear. "And now I'll see you hang. That's what I promised him as he died in my arms." Something in Rowe's expression faltered, perhaps the realization that his final attempt to hurt her had failed, or perhaps simple recognition that his notorious career had finally reached its end. Ethan pulled the outlaw away, handing him off to several posse members for transport. The skirmish was over. 2 of Rowe's men dead, the rest captured, with only minor injuries among Ethan's volunteers. As the chaos settled, Ethan returned to Zachariah's side. "Are you all right?" She considered the question carefully. The confrontation hadn't brought the catharsis she'd expected. Instead, there was a quiet certainty that she'd done what needed doing, not for vengeance, but for justice, for closure. "I think I will be," she answered honestly. Ethan's hand found hers, a brief, supportive touch. "You did well. Your father would be proud." The simple words brought unexpected tears to her eyes. For 2 years, she'd carried her grief like armor, using it to shield herself from anything that might distract from her purpose. Now, with that purpose fulfilled, the armor was cracking, allowing emotions long suppressed to surface. "I didn't kill him," she said quietly. "I could have, but I didn't." "That's what separates justice from vengeance," Ethan replied, "and it's why I knew you weren't as hollowed out as you feared." The ride back to Red Rock Valley was subdued but triumphant. Rowe and his surviving men were securely bound in the stagecoach, guarded by armed posse members. Ethan and Zachariah rode alongside, both lost in their own thoughts as the significance of the day's events settled over them. Word of the capture spread quickly through town. By the time they arrived, people lined the streets, watching as the notorious Silas Rowe was marched to the jailhouse in chains. There were no cheers or celebrations, just the solemn satisfaction of seeing justice served. After securing the prisoners, Ethan found Zachariah waiting outside his office. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the dusty street, the day's excitement giving way to a strange, quiet aftermath. "What happens now?" she asked as he approached. "Now we wire the territorial marshal. Rowe will stand trial for multiple murders, including your father's." Ethan leaned against the porch railing beside her. "With your testimony and the evidence collected over the years, he'll hang within a month." Zachariah nodded, her eyes on the distant mountains. 2 years, she said softly. 2 years of my life dedicated to finding him, and now it's over. Ethan studied her profile. How does it feel? Strange, she admitted. Like waking from a long dream, not sure what's real anymore. What will you do now? The question hung between them, weighted with possibilities neither had dared voice during their pursuit of Rowe. You mentioned Red Rock Valley needing a schoolteacher, she said finally, turning to meet his gaze. Surprise and something warmer flickered in Ethan's eyes. I did, I think. She paused, the words feeling foreign after so long focused on only one goal. I think I might like to build something again instead of just tracking and destroying. The town would be lucky to have you. His voice was carefully neutral, but his eyes told a different story. And what about the sheriff? She asked, a small smile touching her lips for the first time that day. Would he be lucky too? Ethan's expression softened. He already considers himself lucky that the cowboy crossed the dance floor to her corner that night, even though she turned out to be hunting a dangerous outlaw. Especially because of that. He stepped closer, his hand finding hers. Most women would have collapsed under the weight you've carried. You turned it into strength instead. The compliment warmed her, not because she needed his approval, but because he understood what her journey had cost and still saw something worthwhile in her. There's a school board meeting next week, he continued. If you're serious about staying, I could introduce you. I'd like that. She squeezed his hand gently. But first, I need to see Rowe's trial through to the end. I owe my father that much, of course. Ethan nodded, understanding. And afterward? Afterward, Zachariah said, the future opening before her like an uncharted trail. I think I might be ready to stop traveling and find a home again. The territorial marshal arrived 3 days later to transport Rowe and his men to Prescott for trial. Zachariah provided her formal statement, recounting in detail the events at Silver Creek Station 2 years earlier. The marshal assured her that, with her eyewitness testimony, Rowe's conviction was virtually certain. We'll need you in Prescott for the trial, he told her. Should be in about 2 weeks once the circuit judge arrives. 2 weeks. 2 weeks of waiting after 2 years of searching. It seemed both too long and impossibly short. As the marshal's wagon departed with its notorious prisoners, Ethan found Zachariah watching from the boardwalk outside the general store. Come with me, he said without preamble. There's something I want to show you. Curious, she followed him to the livery stable, where they saddled horses and rode out of town. He led her along a winding trail into the hills overlooking Red Rock Valley, finally stopping at a flat outcropping that offered a spectacular view of the town and surrounding countryside. The late afternoon sun bathed everything in golden light, the red rock formations that gave the valley its name glowing like embers, the town's buildings neat and orderly below, the distant mountains purple against the horizon. It's beautiful, Zachariah said, dismounting to stand at the edge of the overlook. I come here sometimes to think, Ethan admitted, joining her, to remind myself what I'm protecting. She understood the sentiment. After years of focusing on one man, one act of violence, there was something healing about seeing the broader landscape, the community, the beauty, the life continuing despite the darkness that sometimes touched it. The school is there, Ethan pointed to a modest building near the church. One room, about 20 students ranging from 6 to 16. The current teacher, Mrs. Abernathy, has been asking to retire for over a year. Zachariah smiled at his transparency. You're quite determined to see me teaching again, Sheriff. I'm determined to see you stay, he corrected, his voice softer. The teaching is just a convenient excuse. The honesty of his admission surprised her, though perhaps it shouldn't have. From their first meeting, Ethan Zaccaro had been direct in his approach. We've known each other less than a week, she reminded him, though without real objection. Time enough to recognize something worth pursuing. He turned to face her fully. When I saw you at that dance, Zachariah, something changed. I'd been drifting since my partner died, just going through the motions. And then there you were, this beautiful woman with secrets in her eyes and steel in her spine. Hardly the stuff of romance, she said, though her heart quickened at his words. Maybe not for most men. His smile was warm, genuine, but I've never been interested in fragile flowers who need constant protection. I admire strength, courage, determination, all the things you've shown in abundance. Zachariah found herself at a rare loss for words. For 2 years, she'd pushed aside anything resembling romantic feelings, focused entirely on her quest. Now, with that quest completed, emotions long suppressed were surfacing with unexpected intensity. "I don't know if I remember how to be anything other than what I've been these past 2 years," she admitted. "The woman who danced with you in that blue dress, she's buried under a lot of hard miles and harder memories." "I don't think so." Ethan stepped closer, his eyes holding hers. "I think she's right here, just waiting for permission to live again." The space between them seemed charged with possibility. Zachariah was acutely aware of his proximity, of the warmth in his gray eyes, of her own pulse quickening in response. "What if you're wrong?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if there's nothing left but the hunter?" "Then I'd still count myself fortunate to know you," he said simply. "But I think there's more to Zachariah Fuller than vengeance. I've seen glimpses of it in your compassion for the stagecoach victims, in your decision to bring Rowe to justice rather than killing him when you had the chance, in the way you're already thinking about teaching again." His understanding of her, this man who had known her less than a week, was both unsettling and oddly comforting. Had anyone truly seen her, really seen her in the past 2 years, 2 weeks until the trial, she said, changing direction slightly. "What am I supposed to do with myself until then?" Ethan smiled, accepting her need to step back from the emotional precipice. "Well, I happen to know Mrs. Abernathy would appreciate someone to help with her students while she battles her rheumatism. And the mayor mentioned the town could use someone who can read legal documents to help organize the land records." "You seem to have been making plans for me," Zachariah observed, though she couldn't muster any real indignation. "Just identifying opportunities," he corrected. "The choice is entirely yours. Stay, go, teach. Don't teach, I won't presume to decide your future for you." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. Unlike so many men she'd encountered in her travels, Ethan truly saw her as an equal capable of making her own decisions, living her own life on her own terms. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" "For offering possibilities instead of prescriptions." She turned back to the view, the town glowing in the late afternoon light. "It's been a long time since I thought about building a future instead of just resolving the past." Ethan's hand found hers, a gentle touch that asked nothing yet offered much. "Whatever you decide, Zachariah Fuller, I'm glad our paths crossed." They stood together as the sun sank lower, painting the valley in deepening hues of amber and gold. For the first time in 2 years, Zachariah felt something like peace settling over her, not the emptiness she had feared would follow vengeance, but a quieter, gentler emotion that held the promise of new beginnings. The 2 weeks before the trial passed more quickly than Zachariah had anticipated. Taking Ethan's suggestion, she offered her assistance to Mrs. Abernathy at the schoolhouse. The elderly teacher, initially skeptical of the strange young woman with the determined eyes, soon came to appreciate Zachariah's way with the children and her clear knowledge of educational methods. "You've taught before," Mrs. Abernathy observed on Zachariah's 3rd day, "and not just any teaching, you've had proper training." "Normal school in Denver," Zachariah confirmed. "Before." She didn't finish the sentence, but the older woman nodded, understanding. "Life has a way of taking unexpected turns, my dear. The question is whether we let those turns define us forever, or if we find our way back to our true path." The wisdom in the simple statement stayed with Zachariah as she gradually settled into the rhythm of Red Rock Valley. In the mornings, she assisted at the school. Afternoons found her helping the town clerk organize land records or assisting at the general store when extra hands were needed. Evenings often included dinner with Ethan, sometimes at the hotel restaurant, occasionally at his modest cabin on the edge of town. They spoke of many things during those dinners: her childhood in Colorado, his years with the Rangers, books they had read, places they had seen. Sometimes they discussed Rowe and the upcoming trial, but increasingly their conversations turned to the future rather than the past. The school board is meeting tomorrow, Ethan mentioned one evening as they walked back from dinner. They're very interested in meeting you formally, Mrs. Abernathy has been singing my praises, I take it, enthusiastically. She told the mayor you're the answer to her prayers, a qualified teacher appearing just when she's at her wits' end with her arthritis. Zachariah smiled, warmed by the endorsement. And what about after the trial? They know I'll be gone for at least 2 weeks. They're prepared to wait, Ethan assured her. Good teachers aren't easy to come by in these parts. They paused at the steps of the boarding house where Zachariah still kept her room, though she had begun to consider more permanent housing options if she decided to stay. Will you attend the meeting? Ethan asked. I will, she decided. Though I can't give them a firm answer until after the trial. Of course. He took her hand, his thumb brushing lightly across her knuckles. No one expects you to make decisions before that chapter is closed. His understanding meant more than she could express. Throughout their growing relationship, Ethan had never pressured her, never demanded commitments or declarations. He seemed content to let things unfold naturally, respecting her need to resolve her past before fully embracing her future. Ethan, she said softly, thank you for your patience. I know I'm not the easiest woman to court. His smile warmed his usually serious features. I wasn't aware I was courting you, Miss Fuller. Is that what we're calling this? The teasing lightened the moment, bringing a smile to her own lips. What would you call it, Sheriff Zaccaro? I'd call it the most interesting, challenging, and rewarding relationship I've ever had. His gray eyes held hers, the humor giving way to something deeper, and I wouldn't change a thing about it. Before she could respond, he leaned forward and brushed his lips against hers, a gentle, questioning kiss that asked permission as much as it expressed affection. Zachariah found herself responding, her hand rising to rest against his chest as the kiss deepened slightly. Still tender but with growing certainty. When they parted, Ethan's expression was a mixture of satisfaction and surprise, as if he hadn't planned the kiss but couldn't regret it either. I should go in, Zachariah said, her voice not quite steady. You should. He stepped back, giving her space. Good night, Zachariah. Good night, Ethan. Inside her room, Zachariah touched her fingers to her lips, still feeling the warmth of the kiss. 2 years of emotional isolation had left her unprepared for the rush of feelings Ethan Zaccaro stirred in her. Yet there was nothing frightening in those emotions, only a sense of rightness, of possibilities long denied now opening before her. The school board meeting the following day went as well as Ethan had suggested it might. The 5 members, including the mayor, the minister, and 3 prominent citizens, were clearly impressed by Zachariah's qualifications and experience. Mrs. Abernathy speaks very highly of your work with the children, Mayor Collins noted, says you have a natural gift for teaching. The children here are eager to learn, Zachariah replied. That makes teaching a joy rather than a job. By the end of the meeting, a tentative agreement had been reached. Pending the conclusion of the trial in Prescott, Zachariah would assume the position of schoolteacher for Red Rock Valley, with a modest salary and accommodations in the small house attached to the schoolhouse. It's not much, the mayor apologized, but it's clean and well-maintained. Previous teachers have found it quite comfortable. It sounds perfect, Zachariah assured him, already envisioning the small cottage as her first real home since leaving Silver Creek 2 years ago. As the meeting concluded, Reverend Mitchell, the minister who served on the school board, approached her privately. Miss Fuller, he said kindly, Sheriff Zaccaro mentioned something of your circumstances, your father's murder, and your pursuit of justice. Zachariah tensed slightly, uncertain where this conversation was heading. I want you to know, the minister continued, that this community understands the importance of closing that chapter properly. We'll support you through the trial and welcome you back with open arms when it's concluded. The simple acceptance not just of her as a teacher but of her need for justice touched Zachariah deeply. Thank you, Reverend. That means a great deal. Sheriff Zaccaro is a good man, Mitchell added with a small smile. We're fortunate to have him. And now, it seems, fortunate to have you as well. The Reverend's gentle endorsement of their relationship might have felt presumptuous coming from anyone else. From him, it felt like a blessing and acknowledgement that the community saw and approved of the connection growing between them. The day before Zachariah was to depart for Prescott, Ethan invited her to dinner at his cabin. It was a simple structure but well built and comfortable, reflecting its owner's practical nature and appreciation for quality. I thought you might prefer a quieter evening before the journey, he explained as he prepared a surprisingly competent meal of venison stew and fresh bread. The hotel can be noisy, especially during festival week. Zachariah moved around the main room, noting the small personal touches that revealed aspects of Ethan's character books on law and history lining a small shelf. A fine chest set on a side table, a meticulously maintained gun cabinet, a sketch of a ranch house pinned to the wall. "Did you draw this?" she asked, studying the detailed rendering. Ethan glanced up from his cooking. "Years ago, it's the house I always thought I'd build someday. It's beautiful." The design was practical yet elegant, a sprawling ranch house with a wide porch, large windows, and separate wings that suggested room for a family. "My father was a carpenter before he took up ranching," Ethan explained. "Taught me to appreciate good design and solid construction." "Will you build it someday?" He stirred the stew thoughtfully. "That depends on many things, mainly whether I have a reason to need a house that size." The implication hung in the air between them, not pressing but present, a future possibility neither was quite ready to articulate fully. Dinner was relaxed and comfortable, their conversation flowing easily from topic to topic. As they finished the apple pie Ethan had purchased from the hotel restaurant's cook, he broached the subject of the trial. "I've arranged to accompany you to Prescott," he said. "Deputy Cooper can handle things here for a couple of weeks." Zachariah looked up in surprise. "You don't need to do that. I can manage the journey and the trial." "I know you can," he assured her, "but Rowe has friends and there's always a risk of attempted rescue or retaliation. Besides," he added more softly, "I'd like to be there for you if you'll allow it." The offer touched her deeply. For 2 years, she had faced every challenge alone, relying solely on her own resources and determination. The thought of having someone standing beside her as she finally closed this chapter was both unfamiliar and profoundly comforting. "I'd appreciate that," she admitted. "Thank you." After dinner, they sat on the small porch, watching the stars emerge in the clear desert sky. The night was cool but not cold, the scent of sage and pinyon pine carried on the gentle breeze. "Are you nervous about the trial?" Ethan asked. Zachariah considered the question. "Not about testifying. I've relived that day so many times in my mind I could recount every detail in my sleep." She paused. "I'm more uncertain about what comes after, how it will feel when it's truly over." "It may take time to adjust," Ethan acknowledged. "You've been focused on this single purpose for so long. But I've made a start, haven't I, with the teaching, with considering a future here." She turned to face him in the starlight. "With us?" Ethan's expression softened. "Yes, you have, and for what it's worth, I think you've already begun to heal, to become more than just the woman seeking vengeance." "Because of you," she said quietly. "You saw me as something more, even when I couldn't see it myself." He shook his head. "I only recognized what was already there, Zachariah. The strength, the compassion, the intelligence, those qualities were always part of you. They were just overshadowed for a time by grief and righteous anger." His understanding, so different from the dismissal or condescension she had encountered from other men during her quest, was like balm to wounds she hadn't fully acknowledged. "When I first saw you at that dance," Ethan continued, his voice low and warm, "standing alone in that corner, watching everything with those observant blue eyes, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years." The cowboy crossed the dance floor to her corner, drawn by something he couldn't quite name but couldn't ignore either. "And what was that something?" she asked, though she thought she knew the answer. "Recognition," he said simply, "of a kindred spirit. Someone who understood loss and duty and purpose." His hand found hers in the darkness. Someone worth knowing, worth caring for no matter what complications might come with that. Zachariah's throat tightened with emotion. For so long, she had defined herself by her quest for justice. Now, through Ethan's eyes, she was beginning to see herself whole again, not just the avenger but the woman with all her complexities and possibilities. "I leave for Prescott tomorrow," she said softly, "but I'll be coming back, Ethan. Whatever happens at that trial, I'll be coming back here to the school, to this town." She squeezed his hand. "To you." The promise, the first real commitment she had allowed herself to make beyond her quest for justice, felt both terrifying and exhilarating. Ethan's response was to draw her gently into his arms, his kiss conveying all the emotions words couldn't adequately express. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "I'll hold you to that, Zachariah Fuller." The journey to Prescott took 3 days by stagecoach. Ethan had arranged for them to travel on the regular line, more comfortable than the express, but still a bumpy, dusty experience. Throughout the journey, he maintained a professional demeanor in public, the sheriff escorting a witness to an important trial, but in private moments. His support was evident in small gestures. A hand at her elbow when the trail was rough, quiet conversations during rest stops, his watchful presence ensuring her safety among the other travelers. Prescott, as the territorial capital, was significantly larger than Red Rock Valley, a proper city with multi-story buildings, paved streets in the central district, and the imposing courthouse where Rowe's trial would take place. They secured rooms at a reputable hotel near the courthouse, preparing for what promised to be a grueling legal process. The trial began 2 days after their arrival. The territorial prosecutor, a sharp-eyed man named Harrison, met with Zachariah the evening before to review her testimony. "You're our key witness, Miss Fuller," he explained. "The only person who can definitively place Rowe at the Silver Creek robbery and identify him as the shooter." "I understand," she assured him. "I've been preparing for this moment for 2 years." Harrison studied her appraisingly. "Most witnesses in murder trials are emotional, unreliable. You seem remarkably composed." "I've had time to process my grief," she said simply. "Now I just want justice served." The prosecutor nodded approval. "That's exactly what the jury needs to see, a credible, composed witness who can clearly recount the events without excessive emotion clouding the facts." The courtroom was packed when the trial began the following morning. News of Silas Rowe's capture had spread throughout the territory, drawing curious onlookers, journalists from as far as San Francisco, and relatives of his many victims. Zachariah sat rigidly in the witness waiting area, her hands clasped tightly in her lap as the proceedings began. Through the open door, she could see Rowe being led into the courtroom shackled, his previous arrogance dimmed by captivity but not entirely extinguished. Ethan, who had been consulting with the prosecutor, joined her in the waiting area. "Are you ready?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "I've been ready for 2 years. Remember," he said, his voice gentle but firm, "he has no power over you anymore. Whatever he says, whatever he does, he's finished. You've won." The simple reassurance steadied her. When the bailiff called her name, Zachariah rose with quiet dignity and entered the courtroom. The next hour passed in a strange combination of acute clarity and dreamlike detachment. She took the oath, stating her name and relationship to the case. Then, under the prosecutor's careful questioning, she recounted every detail of that terrible day at Silver Creek Station, her father's routine morning, her decision to bring him lunch, her hiding place beneath the desk, the arrival of Rowe and his men, her father's refusal to open the safe without proper authorization, the fatal shot, the outlaw's search of the office, and finally, her emergence to hold her dying father. Throughout her testimony, Zachariah kept her voice steady and her eyes fixed either on the prosecutor or the jury. She did not look at Rowe until specifically asked to identify him in the courtroom. "That man," she said, pointing directly at the defendant, "Silas Rowe. He shot my father through the heart when he refused to open the express company safe." Rowe's eyes met hers across the courtroom, cold, calculating, with a hint of the same cruelty she remembered from 2 years ago. But now, instead of fear, Zachariah felt only a calm certainty. This man would face justice for her father's death and for all his other crimes. The defense attorney's cross-examination was aggressive but ultimately ineffective. He tried to suggest that her hiding place wouldn't have allowed a clear view of the shooter, that her grief might have affected her memory, that she could be mistaking Rowe for one of his associates. "I saw his face clearly," Zachariah responded evenly. "I was less than 10 feet away when he fired the shot. I heard his companions call him Silas, and I spent the next 2 years learning everything about him, his appearance, his methods, his associates. I have no doubt whatsoever that this is the man who murdered my father." By the time she was excused from the witness stand, even the defense attorney seemed to recognize the futility of challenging her testimony. The clarity of her recollection, combined with her composed demeanor, had made her an unimpeachable witness. Ethan was waiting when she emerged from the courtroom, her testimony complete. Without a word, he offered his arm, escorting her through the crowd of spectators and reporters who had gathered in the corridor. "You were magnificent," he said quietly once they had reached the relative privacy of a small antechamber. "Clear, composed, absolutely convincing. It felt strange," she admitted, "like I was watching someone else tell my story. That's not uncommon in situations like this. The important thing is that you did it, you faced him, you told the truth, and now justice will be served." The trial continued for 3 more days, with additional witnesses testifying about other robberies and murders attributed to Rowe's gang. Throughout, Zachariah attended each session, sitting quietly beside Ethan as the full extent of Rowe's crimes was laid bare. On the 4th day, the jury retired to consider their verdict. They returned in less than 2 hours, unusually quick for a capital case, but perhaps not surprising given the overwhelming evidence. "We find the defendant, Silas Rowe, guilty on all counts," the foreman announced. A murmur ran through the courtroom, not surprise, but satisfaction that justice had finally caught up with the notorious outlaw. The judge pronounced the sentence immediately. Silas Rowe would hang in 1 week's time. As the convicted man was led from the courtroom, his eyes found Zachariah in the crowd. There was hatred there, certainly, but also something else, perhaps a grudging recognition that this slip of a woman had accomplished what dozens of lawmen had failed to do over the years. Outside the courthouse, standing in the bright Arizona sunshine, Zachariah felt a curious lightness. The burden she had carried for 2 years, the weight of her father's unavenged death, was lifting, leaving her feeling almost weightless. "It's over," she said softly, more to herself than to Ethan, who stood beside her. "Justice has been served," he agreed. "Your father can rest easy now," she nodded, blinking against unexpected tears. "I did what I promised him I would do." Ethan's hand found hers, a steady anchor as emotions she had long suppressed finally surfaced. "Yes, you did." "And now," Zachariah looked up at him, seeing in his gray eyes not just the lawman who had helped her find justice, but the man who had shown her a path forward beyond vengeance. "Now we go home," she said, the words feeling right in a way few things had since her father's death. "Back to Red Rock Valley, back to teaching." She squeezed his hand. "Back to building something new." The smile that spread across Ethan's usually serious features was like sunrise breaking over the desert, warm, illuminating, full of promise. "I was hoping you'd say that," he admitted. "I've grown rather accustomed to having you around, Miss Fuller." "Have you indeed, Sheriff Zaccaro?" She teased, her heart lighter than it had been in years. "In fact," he continued, his tone shifting to something more serious, "I've been considering that house design you admired, thinking it might be worth building after all." Zachariah's breath caught at the implication. "That's quite a project for one person." "I wasn't thinking of building it alone." His eyes held her steadily. "But that's a conversation for another day, when we're home and you've had time to truly close this chapter." She nodded, appreciating his understanding that she needed time to fully process the trial's conclusion before making decisions about their future together. They remained in Prescott for the execution. not out of any desire to witness Rowe's final moments, but to ensure that justice was fully served. When it was done, Zachariah visited her father's killer's grave only long enough to place a simple stone marker not for Rowe, but for all his victims, including Thomas Fuller, station master of Silver Creek. The journey back to Red Rock Valley felt different, lighter, more hopeful. As the stagecoach carried them across the familiar landscape, Zachariah found herself looking forward rather than back, planning lessons for her students, envisioning her life in the small teacher's cottage, contemplating possibilities she hadn't allowed herself to consider for 2 years. And always, there was Ethan beside her, solid, dependable, patient, yet passionate in his own quiet way. The connection between them had deepened during their time in Prescott, tempered by the shared experience of seeing justice served and emerging on the other side together. Red Rock Valley welcomed them back with a warmth that surprised Zachariah. Word of the trial's outcome had preceded them via telegraph, and the community turned out to greet their return not with fanfare or celebration, but with quiet acknowledgement of closure achieved and a new beginning at hand. Mrs. Abernathy was the first to embrace her. "The children have been asking daily when their new teacher would return," the elderly woman said, her roomy eyes bright with pleasure. "I've told them you'd have much to teach them about perseverance and justice." Mayor Collins formally offered the teaching position, which Zachariah accepted with quiet gratitude. Reverend Mitchell blessed her new role with a simple prayer of guidance. The parents of her future students came forward to introduce themselves, welcoming her to the community not as a stranger or a curiosity, but as an integral part of their shared future. Throughout the reception, Ethan remained close by not hovering protectively but present, supportive, his pride in her evident to anyone who observed them together. There was no need for public declarations or demonstrations of affection. The connection between them was apparent in small gestures, shared glances, the natural way they moved in tandem through the gathering. That evening, after the welcome had concluded and Zachariah had settled into the teacher's cottage that would be her new home, Ethan came to call. They sat on the small porch, watching the sunset paint the distant red rocks in deepening shades of crimson and gold. "How does it feel?" he asked. "To be settled in one place after so long on the move. Strange," she admitted. "But good strange. Like I'm finally allowing myself to put down roots again. Any regrets about not continuing to travel to see more of the world?" Zachariah considered the question seriously. "I've seen enough of the world these past 2 years to know what matters most isn't the places you go but the purpose you bring to them." She turned to face him. "I found my purpose here teaching these children, being part of this community. And us?" he asked quietly. "Where do we fit in this new purpose of yours?" The directness of the question was characteristic of Ethan. No games, no pretense, just honest inquiry. "You're a central part of it," she answered with equal honesty. "When I think of my future here, you're always in that vision, Ethan." Relief and joy softened his features. "I was hoping you'd say that." He reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small object that glinted in the fading light. "Because I've been carrying this around since before we left for Prescott, waiting for the right moment." In his palm lay a simple ring, a band of gold with a small sapphire that caught the last rays of sunlight. "It was my mother's," he explained. "My father gave it to her when they settled their homestead, a promise of roots and permanence after years of moving from place to place." Zachariah's heart quickened as she understood the significance of what he was offering. "Zachariah Fuller," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. "When I crossed that dance floor to your corner that night, I had no idea how completely you would change my life. I was existing, not living, going through the motions of being sheriff without any real connection to the community or hope for my own future." He took her hand gently. "You reminded me what it means to have purpose, to fight for what matters, to build rather than just maintain. And somewhere along the way, between tracking outlaws and facing down your demons, I fell in love with you." The simple declaration, so straightforward, so typically Ethan, brought tears to Zachariah's eyes. I'm not asking for an immediate answer, he continued. We've both been through significant changes these past weeks. But I want you to know that whenever you're ready, whether that's a month from now or a year, I'll be here, ready to build that house I sketched, ready to create a life together. Zachariah looked at the ring, then at the man offering it, this steady, honorable man who had seen her at her most driven and vulnerable and had respected both equally. I don't need time, she said softly. For 2 years I lived in the past, focused on justice for what was taken from me. Now I want to live in the present and build toward the future. She extended her hand. And I want to build it with you, Ethan Zaccaro. His smile was brilliant as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit as though it had been made for her, another sign, perhaps, that some journeys, no matter how difficult their beginnings, lead exactly where they're meant to. She's the only one I'll ever hold, Ethan murmured as he drew her into his arms, his lips finding hers in a kiss that sealed their promise. 1 year later, Ethan and Zachariah Zaccaro stood on the porch of their newly completed home, a realization of the sketch that had hung on his cabin wall, now expanded to include a dedicated study for Zachariah's lesson planning and a nursery for the child they expected in the spring. Red Rock Valley had flourished in the intervening months. The capture of Silas Rowe had brought an unexpected notoriety to the town, not the infamy of outlaws, but the reputation of a community where justice prevailed and good people could build safe, prosperous lives. Zachariah had thrived as the town's teacher, bringing progressive educational methods from her training in Denver and a personal understanding of each child's potential. Her students adored her combination of high expectations and genuine care, while their parents appreciated the way she prepared their children not just academically, but for the challenges of life on the frontier. Ethan continued as sheriff, though increasingly he found himself involved in community building rather than law enforcement. With major threats like Rowe eliminated, he could focus on preventative measures, youth programs, and the kind of civic leadership that transformed a settlement into a true community. Their wedding, 6 months after Zachariah's return from Prescott, had been a town-wide celebration not just of their union but of all they represented. Justice served, new beginnings embraced, hope restored after darkness. Now, as they stood watching the sunset from their new home, Ethan's hand rested protectively over the gentle swell of Zachariah's abdomen. Any regrets? He asked, echoing the question he had posed on her return to Red Rock Valley. Zachariah leaned into his embrace, considering the journey that had brought her to this moment, from grieving daughter to determined hunter to teacher and now wife and expectant mother. Not a single one, she answered honestly. Every step, even the painful ones, led me here to you, to this home, to this life we're building together. Ethan kissed her temple gently. When I crossed that dance floor to your corner that night, I never imagined we'd end up here, didn't you? She teased. As I recall, you said I was the only one you'd ever hold, right there in front of everyone, he laughed, the sound rich and free in the desert evening. I don't remember being quite so bold, but if I had been, I'd have been telling the truth. His arms tightened around her. You are the only one I'll ever hold, Zachariah Zaccaro, from that first dance until my last breath. As twilight deepened around them, Zachariah felt a profound sense of completion, not the hollow emptiness she had feared would follow vengeance, but the rich fulfillment of a life reclaimed and redirected toward love, community, and creation rather than retribution. The quest that had driven her for 2 years had led not to an ending, but to a beginning, one filled with purpose, connection, and the kind of deep joy she had once thought forever beyond her reach. And it had all started when a cowboy crossed a dance floor to her corner, drawn by something neither of them fully understood, but both had been wise enough to recognize as worth pursuing. In the distance, the red rocks glowed with the last light of day, standing as they had for millennia witnesses to countless human stories of loss and redemption, vengeance and forgiveness, endings and beginnings. Zachariah and Ethan's story was just one thread in that vast tapestry. But as they stood together on the threshold of their shared future, it felt like the most important one in the world.